We are now left with 2 more minutes to do the facilitation of the logistics. In terms of, maybe let me do a quick roll call just to check who's already joining us and which countries are represented. Do we have representation from Angola? Do we have any representation from Angola? Anyone representing Botswana? Is there anyone representing Botswana? The DRC? Anyone from the DRC? Eswatini? Anyone representing Eswatini? Do we have Lesotho? Anyone representing Lesotho? Anyone from Madagascar? There was someone on the platform at the beginning of the session who said that they are representing Madagascar. Maybe they are still on the road. Madagascar, we go to Malawi. Anyone from Malawi? Mauritius?
Yes, we are here.
Is that Mauritius?
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then from Mauritius, we go to Mozambique. Anyone from Mozambique? Namibia?
Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Bradley and Karula here from the Civil Society Information Center, Namibia.
Thank you very much. Can you please follow the naming conventions? You start off firstly with the organization or the country that you represent, and then followed by your name, please.
Okay, so Civil Society Information Center, it's inside the chat space there, and Bradley Chongarero and Miss Karula Engelbrecht.
Thank you very much. I was saying when you name your gadget on the platform, so that we are able to identify you. You start off firstly with the civic society, and then you follow by your name, the name of the organization, and followed by your name. Thank you very much. Moving in from Namibia, we go to.
Can I also just introduce myself?
Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Karula Engelbrecht, and I'm the coordinator of the Civil Society Information Center Namibia.
Thank you very much, Mefro Engelbrecht. And then from Namibia, we go to the Seychelles. Anyone representing the Seychelles? South Africa? Anyone from South Africa? Tanzania? I see Mr. John Tamwa there from Tanzania.
Yes, I'm Zimbabwean, but working for an organization that is based in Tanzania, the Pan-African Lawyers Union.
Thank you very much, sir.
As well as John Ambrose from TAMWA, Tanzania Media Women Association.
Thank you very much, Tanzania. From Tanzania, we move on to Zambia.
Good morning, comrades. Yeah, Geshom Kawaso, Zambia Social Forum. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move on to Zimbabwe. Anyone from Zimbabwe?
Good morning. I'm Natasha Ntini, and I'm coming from the Southern African Parliamentary Support Trust, SAPST.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
And I'm Janet Zhou. I work with the Zimbabwe Coalition on Data and Development.
Thank you very much. I think we've done with the logistics, as I indicated. Just to recap, can we kindly keep your videos on all the time, and also your mics muted until you're given a platform? In order to request an opportunity to speak, you raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. There's an icon where you can choose where you raise your hand to be given a platform. The session is conducted in the 3 Sardic languages, which is English, French, and Portuguese. If you haven't done so yet, kindly choose the language that you will be using to follow the session. There's interpretation in all of the languages. Now it's time up for me. I have to hand over to the facilitator of the session for today. And the facilitator is Mefro Caroline Guamboka. Madam Caroline Guamboka is an independent, is an international development, policy and advocacy expert. She has 20 years experience, and she has lent her expertise to the position and promote policies and funding that advance the development of the continent. Her vocation has enabled her to work closely with duty bearers in over 40 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, across Europe and parts of Asia. Ms. Guamboka is a member of a trustee and founding director of African Renaissance, a charitable trust that works to advance gender justice and health equity across the continent. She holds a Master of Arts degree in Political Science and International Relations, and also a Bachelor of Arts degree in Anthropology. Ms. Guamboka is also a member of the Technical Working Group convened by the Sardic Parliamentary Forum to provide technical support and backstopping for the process of developing this model law. Madam Guamboka, over to you, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Modise. A very good morning to our distinguished participants. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to this session, to this consultative session. And today we will be going through, reviewing and seeking your observations on the public financial management model law for Sardic. And it's really, it gives me great honor to recognize all the civil society organizations working in advocacy for good governance, promoting economic justice and other development issues with civil society in the sub-region. We also welcome any members who may be coming from outside the Sardic region. They're probably interested to follow this process. As you may be aware, it is quite a model and novel initiative that is led by the Sardic Parliamentary Forum. At this juncture, now that you have introduced yourself, just as gentle reminder, in case you haven't posted your credentials on the chat box, feel free to do so. And I will be taking you through this session for the next couple of hours or so. And to start us off, we would like to take this opportunity to welcome Madam Boemo Sekoma. She is the Secretary General of the Sardic Parliamentary Forum and has continued to provide great leadership in establishing and developing this model law on public financial management, as well as leading conversations with a multiplicity of stakeholders across the sub-region to make sure that everybody's voice is taken into consideration, and that at the end of the day, we have the best possible model law that will serve not only Sardic, but also the rest of the continent on these matters. On behalf of the Public Financial Management Technical Working Group, I take this opportunity to welcome Madam Secretary General to the floor. Over to you, Madam SG.
Good morning, bon dia, bonjour. Thank you, Madam Director of Ceremonies. Allow me to establish the protocol for the day. Dr. Gamal Ibrahim, the Chief of Economic Governance and Public Finance Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, distinguished colleagues from the civil society organizations across the globe, and in particular in Africa, Mr. Danielle Greenberg, our legal drafter for the Sardic model law on public financial management, members of the technical working group on the model law on public financial management. Yourself, Madam Moderator, Ms. Caroline Guamboka, Trustee and Founding Director of the African Renaissance, and a member of the Technical Working Group on Public Financial Management, Sdgs citizens following proceedings on various social media, members of the Fourth Estate, media, staff from national parliaments, and the Sardic Parliamentary Forum, distinguished participants. Dear colleagues, it's indeed a great privilege and honor for me to address a distinguished gathering of fearless advocates, comrades, experts, and practitioners working in the area of public financial management, an area less traveled. I welcome you today to this consultative meeting on the model law on public financial management hosted under the auspices of the Sardic Parliamentary Forum. As you may be aware, the Sardic Parliamentary Forum is accustomed to holding widespread consultations for its model laws under development, in view of ensuring that the model laws are responsive to the current needs and demands of the Sardic citizenry. Dear colleagues, the consultation today takes place after a series of successful consultations have occurred with the Sardic line ministries, auditors general, anti-money laundering agencies, revenue authorities, police representatives, and prosecutors, to cite but a few. However, it was also necessary to engage with private stakeholders, which are essentially non-governmental organizations that are not publicly funded and hence have their own perspective to the state of the public financial management framework of Sardic member states and beyond. At this juncture, I wish to thank you for finding the time to attend today. The forum has always held civil society organizations in high regard and furthermore valued their immense knowledge base, as well as their abundant contributions to state processes. In fact, many of you today already form part of the Sardic Parliamentary Forum's partnership framework, and we equally invite all civil society organizations today to collaborate with the forum beyond the ambit of this August meeting. Dear colleagues, allow me to underscore that the ongoing engagement with civil society organizations is necessary, since you are in touch with the grassroots realities and lived experiences and constantly evaluate national and regional policy on good governance and public financial management. You relentlessly work to promote good governance and thus ensure that public financial management is kept under the radar. The Sardic Parliamentary Forum recognizes that you are smart players in the realm of public financial management and that you denounce corruption, fraud, and bribery on a routinely basis. You follow up governmental measures and actions which affect public financial management. Colleagues, your celerity in uncovering public financial management issues which are relevant to the public is also well known. In this regard, you are known to be guardians of truth and justice. Moreover, you engage with the press and ensure that public financial management is constantly kept under scrutiny of the media. Colleagues, you are also enablers of parliamentarians and feed them information for parliamentary questions, for debates in the House, or for public hearings and campaigns. Therefore, the public financial management landscape is thus incomplete without your diligent work and input. Colleagues, your contributions as civil society organizations to furnish reports to country evaluations relating to democracy and governance indices for Africa are notable contributions, which have ensured that the information garnered is balanced and show the progress made as well as challenges in an unbiased and fair manner. I'd also like to salute the commendable work performed by yourselves as civil society organizations who are involved in sensitization campaigns on public financial management. Some civil society organizations have conducted a tremendous effective work in ensuring that communities in Sardic and beyond understand the budgeting process, the basics of corruption, and the public financial management processes of the state, and knowledge which would otherwise remain completely unknown and far from reach for the layman or laywoman. It is trite, colleagues, that sensitization campaigns on aspects of public financial management which pertain to the bribery of public officials and fraud are of paramount importance if we are one day to rid the region of such malpractices that are abhorrent to good governance. Today, we expect that as prominent civil society organizations of the region, you engage openly and frankly with the legal drafter and learned rapporteurs on the provisions of the public financial management model law, which are of interest to you. For instance, you may consider Part 5 on parliamentary control, which provides for avenues and possibilities for members of parliament to engage with a number of stakeholders during committee sittings, including civil society organizations. In addition, you may wish to consider the offenses section under Part 11, which deal with particular performance management offenses such as maladministration and financial irregularities, and discuss the appropriateness. In addition, you'll equally be interested in Part 4, which deal with the appropriation of funds by government through the budgeting process. Colleagues, Section 60 relating to the SDG budget statement and Section 61 on the international commitment statement will also assist you in holding the government accountable on commitments taken and treaties ratified. Indeed, for the first time, the budget document will need to be explicit about how budget lines are assisting to implement concretely the Sustainable Development Goals and other international commitments, such as those in gender-related treaties and covenants. Dear colleagues and distinguished participants, in terms of the way forward, I wish to mention that civil society organizations will be directly involved in the domestication process of the Sardic model law on public financial management. Since civil society organizations as private stakeholders will be entrusted with a crucial role of providing shadow reports to the Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, which is the dedicated forum organ to monitor domestication. In this respect, civil society organizations may be called upon to work together with other stakeholders such as prosecutors, anti-money laundering agencies, CFT agencies, to provide shadow reports on the observance of public financial management provisions contained in the model law. For civil society organizations who are interfacing for the first time with the forum, you are kindly requested to share your coordinates and your country of origin within Sdgs so that we may get in touch with domestication initiatives when same are operationalized through the Oversight Committee. Without a doubt, public financial management issues in Southern Africa will not be resolved in a fortnight. Consistent sensitization and advocacy will be required by civil society organizations to make the Sardic region become a financial hub that is effervescent with robust public financial management system in each member states. Colleagues, civil society organizations will surely concur that without a strong public financial management framework, the prospect of good governance remains a dismissal. Absence of good governance will in turn lead to corruption, fraud, and abusive practices. There's thus a need to evaluate public financial management as a stepping stone with the aim to attain a true and functioning democracy, where citizens live in freedom and reap the resources of the state with fairness and merit. We have no doubt at the Sardic Parliamentary Forum that civil society such as yourself will assist the forum in that noble and promising endeavor for a better and more equitable Southern Africa and Africa. On this note, I wish you a pleasant session and thank you for your kind listening.
A warm applause to you, Madam SG, for this excellent tone that you have set to start off this meeting. Allow me to recap just very, very briefly and second your support to the fearless guardians of truth and justice that are in session with us today. And just to emphasize to the civil society members, distinguished participants, that as enablers of accountability within the different countries or within the sub-region, I think today presents a very important opportunity to engage, of course, with the Sardic Parliamentary Forum team and distinguished learned rapporteurs that are in the house. Most importantly, with the legal drafter who has taken time and to listen to the issues and put forth these provisions that seek to ensure that there can be a standard set for public financial management issues in Sardic. Of course, it is of concern that as we are doing this, the constant problems that that the continent faces, especially in areas of malpractice, can be considered, and that the role of civil society throughout the policy cycle can be taken, as a step higher, as a notch higher, and beyond this consultation, the preparation for direct domestication, the involvement of civil society members in downstream to ensure that these standards are domesticated and that there is a continuous pace set of an ever-present public financial management framework that responds to the need of the sub-region and even for the specific countries is actually going to be achieved. And with that, distinguished members or distinguished participants, allow me to now introduce our keynote address speaker, Dr. Gamal Ibrahim, who is the Chief of Economic Governance and Public Finance Division of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA. Before I invite him to take the floor, allow me to share that Dr. Gamal currently leads the Economic Commission for Africa's technical work on economics governance, public finance, and illicit financial flows. Previously, he led the secretariat at the Secretariat of the UN High-Level Panel on Financial Accountability, Transparency, and Integrity. And this one was established by the presidents of the UN General Assembly and ECOSOC. Dr. Ibrahim has a Master of Arts in Development Economics from the University of Leeds in the UK and a PhD from Nottingham Trent University in the UK. He taught economics at the Nottingham Business School before joining the Fragile States Unit at the African Development Bank and then the Arab Monetary Fund in Abu Dhabi as a senior economics. And now, of course, in UNECA. He is widely published in books and in leading economic journals, and his main field of specialization is institutional economics with a particular emphasis on development planning, economic governance, finance for development, of course, we've mentioned illicit financial flows, and private sector development. He has also served as a resource person for the African Economic Research Consortium research and training programs, and he is a research fellow for the Economic Research Forum. Dr. Gamal, the floor is yours. Most welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, bonjour, salam alaikum. Ms. Buyomo Sigoma, Secretary General of the Sardic Parliamentary Forum, distinguished heads of civil society organizations, members of the Technical Working Group on Public Financial Management, Mr. Danielle Greenberg, legal drafter for the Sardic Model Law on Public Financial Management, the distinguished meeting facilitator, Ms. Caroline Guamboka, Sardic citizens following proceedings on various social media platforms, staff of parliaments and Sardic Parliamentary Forum, representatives of civil society organizations and media organizations, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Dr. Vera Songwe, is Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, it gives me great pleasure and honor to join you delivering this keynote address. I thank the Sardic Parliamentary Forum for extending this invitation to participate in this consultative meeting on the Sardic Model Law on Public Financial Management, which seeks to discuss very important subject of public financial management at such a time as countries work towards recovery from an unprecedented pandemic and economic crisis. Speaking after Ms. Sukoma is not easy after her extensive and comprehensive lay of the land. So just allow me to say a few words in line with her speech. Allow me first to recognize the Sardic Parliamentary Forum as a trailblazer in the development of model laws, with 4 similar standards already under its belt, namely on HIV and AIDS, eradicating child marriage, elections and gender-based violence. So the development of the Sardic Model Law on Public Financial Management is specifically intended to ensure a robust financial accountability framework for the region, which adheres to the high standards of good governance, integrity, and transparency. The development of the model law is expected, as you know, to contribute to improve efficiencies of state entities that are charged with the task of collecting, managing, and spending tax revenues, and to combat fraud, corruption, and mismanagement of public resources. This regional standard, I'm sure that you'll agree with me, will foster accountability, transparency, independence, and modernity. So this consultative meeting is indeed timely, coming at a time where COVID-19 has unmasked deficiencies and vulnerabilities in our public financial management systems, threatening development gains made over the last decade. This has emphasized the need to reinforce collaboration between the government and civil society in strengthening public financial systems. We are the ECA, just concluded the annual African Economic Conference together with the African Development Bank and UNDP, themed Financing Africa Post-COVID-19 Development. underscores that public financial management will be key vehicles in implementing innovative financing mechanisms, and the importance of non-state actors, mainly civil society, in shaping current discourse on proposed post-COVID financing. So, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, also allow me to briefly touch on the role of public financial management systems to Africa's sustainable and inclusive development, which is a strong focus area of our work at the ECA. Public financial management is an important tool, we think, for domestic resource mobilization, a major focus of our work, and driven by global and regional development agendas. Specifically, the 2015 Addis Ababa Action Agenda, Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and the African Union's Agenda 2063. The success of these agendas greatly depend on the ability of countries to generate and mobilize sufficient, predictable, and timely financial resources. Development experience underscores that reliance on DRM enhances Africa's ownership of public policy, strengthening accountability and reduce volatilities associated with external funding. Uncertainties around external finance coupled with COVID-19 pandemic, I think have refocused efforts at inward resource mobilization. So second, there are bottlenecks to effective resource mobilization in Sdgs and in Africa generally. So I would like to highlight the challenges of corruption and illicit financial flows, which are examples of such leakages, which if not persistently addressed, will continue to undermine the achievements of development gains and outcomes, shortchanging aspiration for the inclusive development of Africa. While there are improvements in specific countries, we recognize that Africa generally remains prone to countries whose levels of corruption remains rampant. So for several years, ECA has been instrumental in efforts to improve public financial management in Africa through providing technical advice, policy tools, guidelines, model legislation, and generating the necessary policy recommendations to support countries in formulating the right public financial management systems, improve overall economic governance trajectory. We recognize that these efforts are driven by the overarching goal of boosting domestic resource mobilization among countries. Let me just give you a few examples. The ECA, in partnership with the African Union Commission, developed the African anti-corruption model legislation in 2015. In 2011, ECA, in collaboration with the African Union Advisory Board on Corruption, rolled out a 5-year regional anti-corruption program to scale up the fight against corruption. Also, our biennial flagship publication, the Economic Governance Report, it was initially African Governance Report, has shaped discussions and policy reforms aimed at not only stemming corruption, but improving public financial management and overall economic governance. But despite these efforts, public financial systems remain underpinned by the phenomenon of illicit financial flows, mostly at upstream end of resource mobilization. IFF facilitates the misuse of the public finances and erode public spending efficiency through loopholes in public procurement and contracting motivated by anonymous company ownership and unprecedented financial and undeclared financial accounts. The African Union ECA high-level panel on illicit financial flows from Africa, led by former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, found a staggering 1 trillion flows illegally out of developing countries annually, and over 50 billion leaving the continent annually due to crime, corruption, and tax evasion and tax avoidance, close to 10 times the amount of foreign aid flowing into these same economies. I mean, this 10 times globally, and it's about twice the aid just going to Africa. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, so combating illicit financial flows from Africa requires a whole of government, but I say indeed a whole of society approach. We work very closely with a myriad of partners, including civil society organizations, through the Consortium on Illicit Financial Flows in Africa, to raise awareness of this problem and build capacity of member states in curbing it. As of now, we are implementing a project to build capacity of 12 countries in generating their own statistics or estimation of illicit financial flows. Almost half of these countries are in the Sardic region. We work with Angola, with Mozambique, Namibia, South Africa, and Zambia. The outcome will help to inform necessary policy response. We highly commend the interest in the region and call on more countries in our next project phase. So let me touch now on the tools for strengthening public financial management, which we rolled out, which is the Integrated National Financing Framework, which is an approach or a framework for financing national development priorities and the SDGs at the national level by integrating national priorities, i.e. development plans, with financing from different sources, identify and address incoherencies and exploit unused opportunities. INFF tries to close the gap between planning and finance by bringing various stakeholders together and applying a whole of government approach. A total of 34 countries across the continents are operationalizing INFFs with support from civil society. Although civil society is a relatively new actor in public budgeting, evidence that civil society is having a positive impact on budget decision-making and implementation is beginning to emerge. Let me give you an example of South Africa. As you know, that the Institute for Democracy played a substantial role in strengthening the new Financial Management Act by insisting on the provisions requiring direct departmental responsibilities for overspending. So as I'm closing, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, it is imperative, I think, that the Sardic Parliamentary Forum has found it fit to specifically engage CSOs during this consultative process on the Sardic model law on public financial management. This is in recognition of the fact that civil societies have come into their own in terms of public financial management, and they do have a lot to offer. In this regard, I have every confidence that the contribution of the CSOs represented here today towards the process of developing the model law on public financial management will be invaluable. I accordingly call upon all participants to fully interact with the resource person, who is a legal drafter, in order to seek clarity and improve the provisions of contained in the draft Sardic model law on public financial management. It's my hope that this engagement will contribute to making the draft model law responsive to emerging financial challenges in the Sardic region. It is now my singular honor and privilege to wish you all a successful meeting and fruitful deliberations today. And thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gamal. I think you can hear or see the warm applause coming from the distinguished participants because you have added even more strength to what is going to be deliberated on today. I think it's you know, I wouldn't go to the next session without mentioning some key things. One, Sardic and Sardic Parliamentary Forum being a trailblazer in model laws. I think this we really recognize and appreciate, and that's why today's deliberations, as much as they are Sardic focused, really do have an impact across the continent, and I'm sure there are members watching from other sub-regions learning and looking forward to replicating some of these best practices. The very excellent submission you have made on the recent updates, the annual economic conference, that has just taken place, that is really looking at innovative financing mechanisms post-COVID. I think this is very important that you have emphasized the importance of public finance, financial management mechanisms as one of the things that we need to look at in innovating. Because sometimes the financial conversations are always about mobilizing more resources, and we really need to focus that we can mobilize more if we manage better. I think this is quite an important role for PFM in domestic resource mobilization. Is a point of emphasis that I wish to just borrow from your very excellent and inspiring remarks this morning. The reminder of the post-2015 Addis Ababa Action Agenda and the Africa we are looking at in Agenda 2063. What we want to achieve can only be constructed through these processes that we continue to build, to innovate. The policy systems that we put in place is what we look forward to taking us to the Africa that we all look forward to. I think, I wouldn't emphasize more on the strategies of anti-corruption that you are already working on with the African Union, the very, very amazing work on IFFs, led by His Excellency Thabo Mbeki. In fact, just to preempt, that will be the next video clip that we watch. So as the media team are standing by to bring us closer and to share with civil society the excellent work, Dr. Gamal, that you have been leading on IFFs. I wish to also say that, or just recognize that the combating of ills that you have, the steps that you're putting through the consortium of IFFs to build capacity of member states. The 12 countries that you're focusing on, half of which are in the Sardic region. The tools, the integrated national financing frameworks that are taking this work to the level that it is required to operationalize these aspirations is really something that the civil society members that are listening in today can carry on, can expound, can continue engaging you and the Sardic Parliamentary Forum through, and of these countries that are already operationalizing the INFFs. I think these are important tools that can continue being expounded and utilized to respond to current and emerging needs in this subsector or in public financial management issues. So with that, Dr. Gamal, once again, is to really appreciate your remarks, and this segues us very, very smoothly into the presentation, the video clip that we will watch just before we welcome the legal drafter, Dr. Danielle Greenberg, to make his submission. Over to you, media team, for the video clip.
This is not about a campaign against multinationals just blankly. We would like to see clean businesses who come here, pay their taxes when they work with us. The idea of reporting all their profit in a small headquarters where there are only 2 or 3 people working there and overlooking the entire operation, which is 60-70% of it is happening in this continent, we would like that to stop.
curtail abusive transfer pricing, for example, trade misinvoicing, for example. There's a lot of work that remains to be done.
We must indeed achieve the objective of stopping the bleeding, of retaining these resources on the continent, which are illicitly flowing out of the continent.
These scenes are not so dissimilar to one that happens every day across the African continent. A businessman goes into a bank and makes a transfer of funds to an offshore company. Little questions are asked and millions are funneled out of the country electronically in a matter of minutes to a territory where little or no tax is accrued. This scenario is also surprisingly legal. A senior government minister collaborates with a mineral company executive to stash money and profits earned illegally in a foreign bank. A woman gives $5,000 to a man in the hopes to get her whole family across the border illegally. This is a human trafficker. He deposits the money in an overseas bank where it is cleaned and legitimized. All these are examples of illicit financial flows, or IFFs. Money leaving the continent, being funneled into international, global, already developed capitals and depriving African national economies of vital liquidity and resources. The campaign to stem IFFs, or previously termed capital flight, is by no means a new phenomenon and has recently received a boost by the revelation of the Panama Papers, an unprecedented leak of over 11 million files detailing wealthy individuals and numerous multinationals exploiting secretive offshore tax regimes has elevated the issues of illicit flows to the forefront of the global agenda and media scrutiny. The establishment of the high-level panel represented a watershed and new strategy to combat the illicit flows.
All started on a Sunday in Malawi. We were preparing for the opening of the African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development Conference in 2010. The room was full. We were really surprised with the response. And those who attended, they said, no, this has to go to the ministerial proper the following day. And we had a 2 hours discussion on it. And African Ministers of Finance, in their wisdom, they said, no, this is a development issue that is too important for the continent. We cannot allow this continent, the poor part of the world, to subsidize the rich part.
I sometimes refer to it as being like a hydra with many heads. And a strange hydra, when you cut some heads, by the time you get to the 7th head, the first one has regrown. It's so dynamic, it keeps on changing shape and form. So we have to be resolved to the fact that we will always be chasing, finding out new ways of illicit financial flow and trying to deal with them. That's the first thing.
GFI analyzes illicit financial flows, not only out of Africa, but out of other parts of the world as well. We did a study of illicit money going out of Africa. We were asked by UNECA to come and discuss it. We did so. This is going back 5 or 6 years now. UNECA was frankly fascinated with our analysis that the commercial component of illicit financial flows is bigger than the corrupt component of illicit financial flows, because quite honestly the media had been for years enjoying its criticism of Africa for the amount of corrupt money that is going out. So we came along and said, yes, corruption's a problem, but the biggest part of this is commercial.
According to GFI, these are the 3 clear definitions of IFF as seen before earlier: corruption, criminal, and the commercial aspect. The estimated 50 to 80 billion US dollars that the African continent loses annually in illicit flows is about double that what the continent receives in ODA, or official development assistance. Moreover, based on the methodology of the Economic Commission for Africa, abusive transfer pricing and misinvoicing, the underreporting of amounts produced and profits made are another major source of commercial illicit funds lost forever.
When we then presented our report to the African heads of state and government,
They adopted the report in full, adopted the recommendations that we had made, and then decided as African heads of state and government to follow up on the implementation of what had been the recommendations, which had then been adopted as decisions of the AU summit.
There's been a confluence of forces that have really given this a boost, and also, as you know very well, the birth of this was looking for how the continent can finance itself. And one of the immediate low-hanging fruits was the issue of illicit financial flows out of Africa. So I think it's firstly therefore leadership, secondly circumstance, and thirdly the strategy brought to this by the ECA.
So it's been an exciting work, and the whole purpose is to promote African development. And how do you promote it? There has to be resources. It's resource mobilization. And in that regard, what are the obstacles to resource mobilization? And one of the obstacles is illicit financial flows from the continent.
There is really nowhere else on the continent where there is a plug-in for policy and legislative shifts that we need to make on the continent to defend our outflows, other than currently the high-level panel. And they're doing a tremendous job because they've gone from beyond the report and letting it gather dust in somebody's office, but also looking at the systemic work that needs to be done, work with regards to policy and policy shifts, both at the ministerial, Ministry of Finance level, as well as bringing in civil society and regional organizations to make the necessary policy shifts that we require. It's good work that they do.
Even before the Panama Papers, they have managed to elevate the issue of international financial flows, at least, or illicit financial flows from Africa, at least, into an international issue. It's a global challenge also. So they anticipated the Panama Papers. Perhaps they'll be similar in future, but already the work of the panel has already put this into the fore, has already elevated this into a global issue, a global challenge, something requiring global action.
Illicit flows have steadily increased over the years in scale and magnitude, and fundamentally undermine our ability on the continent to achieve our sustainable development goals, impede transparency, and risk further increasing inequality and poverty. The campaign to stem IFFs is now galvanized under a wider context, incorporating an array of actors from civil society, tax and governance advocates, and government and parliamentarians.
We wanted it on the global agenda. It is now on the global agenda. So there are many people who are part of this campaign to stop the continent bleeding of these resources. So it's governments, it's civil society, it's business, it's everybody.
Our role we see as bringing the interests of citizens on the table to ensure that the design of policies that will ultimately curtail illicit financial flows and ensure domestic resource mobilization are policies that are not also at the same time leading to increased inequality and having a situation where it's already the poor that are already carrying the burden that are going to suffer out of that. And for that to happen, you need to have civil society organizations in the room to create that critical mass of actors to be able to again, demand that the politicians and the governments actually fulfill their commitments, honor their commitments in terms of what they have said they are planning to do to curb illicit financial flows.
Firstly, do you even know that there's IFFs? And if you do, what does that mean to you as a political party? In election campaigns, in parties that are in parliament, because we just say MPs, some come from ruling parties, some from opposition. Those that are in ruling parties, how are you influencing your own ruling party in terms of IFF? But more so, because parliamentarians get a budget for constituencies, are you taking this as an issue at constituency level, where you are saying in terms of mobilization, how do I take this message and explain it to an ordinary African? I mean, Panama Papers came. For Africa, we say they came, they are gone. For most African communities, it has meant nothing. People don't even know what that is. So we are saying at APNIFT, it is your role as an MP to take this message to that lower level, because these are the people that vote and keep governments afloat. If they're not empowered to know what is going on, they are never going to hold governments accountable.
Accountability is also in need of another key building block to fight illicit flows: capacity. Capacity building of appropriate institutions across the continent is key to improving skills and enforcing financial retention.
We begin to see that capacity challenges or the lack of capacity is a critical issue for combating illicit financial flows and stopping the bleeding. In particular, one area where African countries have big problem is actually implementing the legislations and the laws that they have for for money laundering and for corruption and for all kinds of activities, illegal outflow of funds. And so we're working very hard to strengthen these institutions so that they can become more effective in dealing with these issues, and they become better coordinated in terms of what they do.
A clear metric on the success of tracking illicit flows is also its subsequent retrieval. Headway has now been made in a number of countries, generating repatriation of funds and the curtailment of aggressive tax avoidance regimes.
But we need even improvements to track it better. Better accounting and international accounting standards, better capacity with customs officials, better capacity in drawing agreements and other things. I mean, even just identifying or tracking will take some effort.
Uganda recently won an international court case against a British oil company, and as a result of that case, gathered $423 million in income that they would have lost did they not have a capital gains tax policy and law in Uganda. Many African countries do not have that. And because Uganda had that law, they were able to go to international arbitration, win the case, and now have that income.
The cumulative effect of strengthening financial architecture, challenging banking secrecy, and reforming common tax orthodoxy reduces outflows and critically increases income on the continent. As the fight to stem illicit flows continues, the policy and legislative shifts being implemented by the panel will inevitably need to adapt to future innovative and more clandestine methods of outflows, preempting a drive to shift not only the legal structures, but also an overall moral offensive on IFFs and their consequences.
You know for a fact that basically everybody in the world is going to disapprove. It might be legal, but if it's immoral, and people understand what that immorality means in practical terms. But secondly, I think there's much greater commitment among governments throughout the world that where legislation doesn't exist, it must be passed. Where it exists, it must be enforced. That you need all of these agreements and benchmarks, standards and all that to ensure that you have both you can have moral motivation, please act correctly, but you must also have the law on your side to say those who don't act correctly, then the law can act against them. So that you see even the definition of what's illicit in terms of the law, as people understand the loopholes and so on, and the impact, the negative impact of these illicit flows in terms of the quality of the lives of many, many people.
Very much. Thank you very much, media team, for that very insightful piece. And I start from the comment, the last comment. by His Excellency Thabo Mbeki. You know, we cannot have, there is no sustainability if we have islands, just a few islands of wealth existing in, you know, seas and oceans of poverty. This is not sustainable. And, you know, just a few messages from that clip. I think it's very clear. It speaks for itself. We need to stop the bleeding. We need to stop the bleeding. We need to enable for legislative shifts to take place so that systemic work can be supported. We need to create that supportive system or supportive structure that enables for systemic work to take place so that the bleeding can stop. You know, our keynote address speaker, Dr. Gamal, already pointed out how much more is lost from the continent, and you can see it for yourselves from the clip, how much more we are losing, up to 10 times more of the inflows, you know, against what is flowing in, 10 times more of that is getting lost because of illicit financial flows. So I don't want to take too much time on the clip. I think Secretariat, you can provide, you know, if there is a possibility of providing the link so that the distinguished members can review some of those realities again against the work that they do, that this can indeed be part of setting the conversation going and sustaining the momentum for public financial management. And now to our main speaker, our legal drafter. I would like to welcome the legal drafter, Dr. Danielle Greenberg, to make a presentation on the Sardic model law on PFM that he has been drafting. A little bit on Dr. Greenberg is to really share with the distinguished participants that Dr. Greenberg is a barrister specializing in legislation and legislative process. He currently serves as counsel for domestic legislation in the House of Commons in the UK, and also as a general editor of Westlaw UK, Thomson Reuters. He has over 30 years experience in legislative drafting and machinery of government. He has drafted legislation, you know, edits 2 legal dictionaries and an international legal journal, has worked with so many parliaments across the world, including the UK, Albania, Isle of Man, Gibraltar, Myanmar, Nigeria, just to name a few. He has extensive experience as, you know, detailed in training and teaching legislative drafting skills. And this includes intra-government and external consultation processes. Dr. Danielle is also an associate research fellow of the Institute of Advanced Legal Studies of the University of London and a fellow of the Bingham Institute for the Rule of Law. I think there's really excellent talent, capacity, and skills that we have managed to gain from Dr. Greenberg. And it really gives me a great opportunity at this juncture to welcome Dr. Greenberg to take us through the model law. Over to you, Dr. Greenberg.
Thank you, distinguished Madam Facilitator. Good morning to you. Good morning to distinguished Madam Secretary General and to our distinguished keynote speaker, Dr. Gamal Ibrahim. I share your welcome, which is extended to those joining us from civil societies, but I also wish to note with particular pleasure that this meeting is being joined both contemporaneously and after the event by Sardic citizens throughout the region through the social media tools. And for those who are joining us on live stream, I, on behalf of Madame Secretary General and also on behalf of the Distinguished Technical Working Group and you, Madam Facilitator, I extend a welcome based on the importance of citizenry engagement in this model law, which will not work without the ownership of the citizenry that comes from a constructive engagement in the creation and development of the provisions of the model law themselves. I will shortly share my screen and take distinguished delegates through some key features of the model law. But before I do that, I wish to share with distinguished delegates two fundamental principles upon which the articulation of the model law is based. As always, when drafting legislation, one is faced with the need to balance conflicting desiderata. And in the case of the model law on public financial management, there are four conflicts, there are four tensions that pose an initial challenge to the framing of the law. And that challenge is one which you, Madam Facilitator, as a member of the Distinguished Technical Working Group, have been involved in facing. First, there is a need to balance simplicity against a requirement of certainty. This model law must be simple if it is to be understood by those at whom it is addressed. It must resonate with a clear and simple series of messages that can be appreciated and operated by all. And yet, it is dealing with a highly technical area, an area of professional complexity and demanding technical features. And the law must provide certainty in relation to the technical issues surrounding public financial management. And that has to be balanced with the need to provide a simple construct that everybody can follow. Following directly from that comes the need to balance accessibility with accuracy. This morning's consultative forum is really all about accessibility because distinguished delegates hail from the civil society constructs which are designed to ensure that the legislation on public financial management is entrenched within society as a whole and is accessible to society as a whole. So we have tried to use language which is accessible, a plain language approach that enables the engagement and ownership to which I alluded a moment ago, but coupled with, again, a high level of accuracy reflecting the technical detail of the highly technical subject with which this model law deals. I have no doubt, Madam Facilitator, that many of those present today were involved in the consultation on the Sardic model law in relation to child exploitation in the field of marriage. And that law posed a huge number of its own challenges, a huge number of different societal, political, and social issues. But it did have the one advantage that it was dealing with a subject which is very easy to understand in real world terms. There's nothing difficult about the concepts of exploitation or understanding the wickedness that underpins it. But here, much of the devil in financial management lies in the detail of the legislation that surrounds it. And it is a particular challenge, therefore, to ensure that the simple and accessible format provides the sufficient accuracy and certainty to combat at a technical level the technical difficulties with which we are confronted. The clip we just saw on illicit financial flows showed how very often they are centered upon technical banking issues, money laundering issues of great complexity. And the law has to be simple and accessible, but at the same time, it has to be sufficiently certain and accurate to deal with those real world situations at the same level of technical complexity with which those who are trying to exploit them engage. Next, the clarity that is a necessary concomitant of the simplicity and the accessibility has to be weighed against a need to be flexible. Madam Facilitator, we could show a clear snapshot of where public financial management is today on the face of the model law, and were we to do that, the model law would become obsolete within days of its promulgation. We have to ensure that while giving clarity as to the state of the law today, the model law encodes and enshrines flexibility to adapt to the emerging developments of tomorrow. And nowhere in the model law is that more urgent or more apparent a need than in relation to crypto assets and cryptocurrency in Part 12 of the model law. You, distinguished Madam Facilitator, will remember that it was the technical working group that encouraged me to expand the original provisions on crypto assets and to provide greater detail into their regulation. But it's actually impossible to do that in a way that does not invite instant obsolescence, because the mechanisms of cryptocurrency are changing literally every day. So we have tried in Part 12 to combine a clarity and a flexibility. We have articulated fundamental principles of crypto regulation, drawn from the London School of Economics and Political Science Institute of Global Affairs Basic Principles for Regulating Crypto Assets, 4th draft. But we have tempered those articulated principles with a flexibility that is designed to enable us to reflect the changing developments that we expect week by week, never mind month by month or year by year, in relation to that enormously complicated issue that risks infecting financial misuse, financial misconduct, and indeed financial crime in every area of public financial management. Finally, the principles-based approach has to be matched by an enforceability. As we heard on the clip we just saw, a public financial management system does have to begin by exhorting and appealing to the moral responsibility of state actors. But as we saw in that clip, those actors need to know that if they fail to accept the challenge of that responsibility, there is an enforceable mechanism of sanctions, both criminal and others, that will provide an effective deterrent against misconduct, but also an effective driver towards the acceptance of the responsibility within the model law. My second preliminary observation is this. The Sardic region model law, promulgated by the Parliamentary Forum, has to reflect the constitutional unique realities of each member state of the Sardic itself. And there is a significant variation as to the amount of detail that is incorporated in the constitution and other legislative mechanisms of each Sardic state. And the model law therefore needs to permit contextualization in the course of the domestication of the model law within each state. Distinguished delegates will therefore find footnotes in a number of places in the model law that expressly refer to the need for contextualization as part of the domestication process to avoid overlap with the Constitution or other legislative frameworks, and to ensure compatibility and to avoid inconsistency. Madam Facilitator, I will now proceed to share my screen and identify some core principles of the model law. Would somebody from the Secretariat be kind enough to confirm that distinguished delegates can now see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Dr. Greenberg.
Thank you very much. In line with the balancing exercise that I adumbrated a moment ago, Part 2 of the model law articulates aims and objectives. Clause 9 sets out purposes for the Act, and these are not merely part of the preamble, although they will appear there too. These are operative provisions of the law that the courts will apply in accordance with the principles of administrative law. And they include the purpose to foster accountability, transparency, independence, and modernity through efficiency and effective processes in relation to the raising of revenue, the expenditure of revenue, and resources more generally. And distinguished delegates will appreciate when I show them later that the accountancy and other regulatory features of the bill focus not on cash accounting, but resources, which is of vital importance if illicit financial flows are to be traced through their non-cash stages. Accounting for receipts and expenditure and parliamentary oversight. We saw in a clip for one of the consultative forums a few weeks ago, Madam Facilitator, we saw a number of observations made by young members of different Sardic states, their observations about public financial management, which is not something on which perhaps one intuitively expects young citizens to have profound views, but they clearly did. And one of the ones that remained with me most strongly was a young lady from one Sardic state explaining that the fair raising of revenue is not what concerns her, as much as the fair expenditure in a way that benefits all citizenry in a reasonably proportionate and reasonably equal way. So we do combine regulation of fiscal processes with the regulation of expenditure mechanisms in a number of places in the model law for that reason. Clause 10 requires, in the interests of accessibility and engagement, citizenry engagement, it requires the establishment of measurable outcomes for the optimization of public revenue and expenditure, for the prevention of unauthorized expenditure, to directly link public financial management to sustainability for future generations, and to optimize the effectiveness of parliamentary accountability and oversight. And ministers are mandated in subsection 2 of clause 10 to operate a scheme with measurable benchmarks for testing success towards the achievement of those outcomes. Clause 11 articulates the public financial management principles: transparency, accountability and participation, with formal and meaningful opportunities for the public, expressly including the most disadvantaged within the public, to engage in the budget process and other aspects of public financial management in accordance with the principles of participatory democracy, the oversight principle and the responsibility principle to which I alluded before, which is itself founded on the values in clause 10, integrity, independence, impartiality, equity, professionalism, accountability, and ultimately responsiveness. Clause 13 alludes to the constitutional contextualization to which I referred a moment ago. Part 3 of the model law identifies the primary authorities responsible for its enforcement and operation: the finance minister, the finance secretary as head of the permanent financial civil service, their powers for inspection, the details of the functions of the finance ministry, the details of the functions of individual accounting officers within units of public bodies and their functions, and it alerts the reader to the later discussion of the Auditor General. Part 4 deals with the establishment of public funds, including the consolidated fund, but also including more specialized funds, the retention accounts, the trading accounts, the debt servicing accounts. And at an earlier stage of the consultative forums, we were asked to look at including more about special funds, and we will do that thing. Part 5 deals with the supply and appropriation process in a form with which delegates will be familiar. Part 6 deals with parliamentary control based on a parliamentary engagement principle. And that engagement principle is, of course, Madam Facilitator, of course it is not prescriptive of what processes individual Sdgs state parliaments and legislatures should operate. That is very much a matter for each implementing state to decide, but it does refer to the entire range of opportunities in accordance with the standing orders and other arrangements of each parliament. The Auditor General's status and functions are then set out, and the status, the independence of the status is stressed, as are the functions for review, along with the functions of the National Audit Office and the reporting and audit responsibilities. Moving then to the Public Accounts Committee in each parliament, established to provide that oversight, again, subject to contextualization within each jurisdiction. Clause 47 speaks to the civil society regime in particular by requiring the Public Accounts Committee to maintain a complaints portal for the public to use for complaints in relation to public financial management. And that provision is inextricably linked with clause 45, which requires public whistleblowing protection, without which effective internal control of public financial management is impossible. Part 7 deals with the national budget process, with documentation requirements that are designed to improve the accountability and transparency of the financial management process, Departmental objectives, a sustainable fiscal policy, sustainable development goal statement, an international commitment and project statement, an equality and diversity statement to remind all citizenry of Sdgs states that equality and diversity must be at the heart of effective public financial management. Past year and future implication states and multi-year statements and multi-year budget projections, and a public debt statement to which I will return in one moment. Combining clarity and flexibility, provision is made for adjustment budgets, for in-year budget reports, for delays, for virements, for withholding, and for unauthorized expenditure. We have to permit the flexibility to react to emerging real-world events, but we have to avoid that flexibility resulting in a complete lack of control. So it therefore takes place within the model law in an envelope of overarching regulation and oversight. Part 8 deals with government borrowing, including a wide classification of public debt, and the requirement to have a strategy through committees to control but oversee also government debt in all forms, including the issue of securities, including on-lending, including guarantees and indemnities, including anything that ends up in potentially incurring a public liability. And the public debt statement, to which I said I would return as part of the budget process, is required to have specific streams of information and to have attached to it a public debt schedule. The debt ceiling, again, is not in any sense prescriptive to states. It does not control the substance. What it does is it requires special procedures for oversight and control to be triggered by reaching a particular ceiling. Part 9 deals with procurement and public resources, which is of particular importance, of course, in relation to preventing illicit financial flows and mismanagement generally. Again, there is flexibility provided for in emergency procurement, but within an envelope of overarching scrutiny. Part 10 deals with public accounts, and as I said before, these are on a resource accounting basis to provide the broadest possible control of public financial implications, with a whole of government basis for the accounts, again, giving a true and fair picture of the widest possible range. Part 11 deals with financial misconduct, misuse, and maladministration. It aims at all public officials. It creates an offence of financial misconduct and an offence of misuse of public funds, based, of course, on penalties that will be provided necessarily, proportionately and coherently within the criminal context of each jurisdiction. Maladministration is created not as an offence, but as a reporting mechanism that can lead to certain kinds of disqualification in accordance with the separation of powers. Part 12 on cryptocurrencies I have discussed before and therefore will not discuss at any length now. Part 16 again stresses the need for flexibility with a power for supplementary regulation, a power to give guidance, but always under the envelope of parliamentary control and scrutiny for which express provision is made. Madam Facilitator, I have now taken up the time allotted to me in the programme, and I hope I have adumbrated the principal features of the model law sufficiently to provide an effective basis for the questions, comments, and suggestions of distinguished delegates. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg. A very, very big round of applause to you for swiftly taking us through the provisions in the model law for PFM. And it is at this juncture that, without much ado and without repeating the great comments and even limitations that you started off the session with, I just wish to really open the floor to the members of civil society, distinguished members. The floor is now open, and I can see we are just about at 50 participants in the room, and it would be prudent for us to go alphabetically by country. I suggest that we go by country, as this will give an opportunity for all member states represented here today, or civil societies from member states represented here today, to bring their observations and comments to the table. Allow me to take this opportunity to invite delegates from Angola. Angola, if there are delegates representing civil society movements in Angola, we invite you to take the floor. You can raise your hand so that we can see you and recognize you. And we will allow you to take the floor and make your observations. Angola. Okay, as Team Angola, if they are not online or if they are on their way, we will now consider Botswana. Civil society representing the Republic of Botswana, or from the Republic of Botswana. Botswana, DRC, okay, I can see a hand. I can see a hand from Zimbabwe. I can see a hand from Zimbabwe. I do recognize that some of the civil society members could be doing multi-country programs. And if that is the case, if I mention a country that you're already working in, please feel free to step in regardless of where you're based. I can see a hand from the Zimbabwe coalition. Zimbabwe coalition.
Thank you very much, Caroline. It's only that I know Zet will come at the end and I may have to leave soon. This has been very enlightening and I think a very comprehensive monologue. We have been waiting for this and advocating for it for quite a while as well. ZimCode hosts what is called the Southern Africa People Solidarity Network. So we also work at that level of the Sardic, and issues around public finance management at a regional level have been a major concern for our network members, who are composed of community-based organizations, social movements that are being impacted, especially by illicit financial flows, extreme poverty, inequalities, unemployment, and the like. So this is really welcome. And I think from the presentation that Dr. Greenberg has done, I think this is very comprehensive. And we are looking at, we know that many times we do laws, protocols in treaties at the Sardic level, but when it comes to national implementation, that is where we have really major challenges. We have been following, for example, on the debt question that he was referring to. Most of the Sardic countries have not been complying with the legal or the thresholds at their national levels, but also at the Sardic level of 60% of the GDP. Most of them exceed those thresholds. So we hope that we'll be able to do a lot of work in terms of ensuring that this is domesticated and it can be implementable, and we can monitor and track implementation at the national levels. I really appreciate the role of Parliament. We have different programs that we are also running in terms of oversight role by Parliament. What we have seen in the region in quite a number
of countries as well, is that there is a massive curtailing of the oversight role of Parliament in public finance management. The executive borrowing or over exceeding, budgets, creating deficits and over expenditures without parliamentary approvals. And this is a case that we've realized, especially in Zimbabwe, where we are sitting, but in quite a number of other Sardic countries as well. So I think strengthening the role of Parliament on PFM is a welcome development that the PFM model law is covering. But I think there is also an issue of, I don't know how we're going to make states as well commit to strengthening, the parliamentary system in terms of oversight, because in many of the jurisdictions in the region, there's lack of capacity at parliament level as well to play that oversight role. So I think there is need for budgetary commitments to allocate to, Parliament, especially for those that work maybe within the parliamentary portfolio kind of committee systems, to strengthen, parliamentary portfolio committees so that they can play their role in terms of budget performance, monitoring, in terms of debt monitoring, in terms of tax incentives monitoring, and all these issues, because they remain very technical. And most of our MPs are not elected on the basis of educational qualifications or expertise. They are coming from their constituencies, representing constituencies, and mainly governance issues as they just appeal at election periods to their constituencies. So I think there is need for the model law to really ensure that states commit to budget allocations for the capacity building of Parliament. Lastly, I'm very interested because in Zimbabwe, we were just actually aligning our Public Finance Management Act to the Constitution, and we've been working on some of these issues to ensure that the Public Finance Management Bill that has already gone through public consultations really captures some of these issues that are being raised, especially on strengthening the parliamentary oversight role and curtailing the excess powers by the executive when it comes to the PFM. So it's to also see how this model law is going to influence the processes that are already ongoing, whether there will be those clauses to deal with reforms that may be required to ensure that there is alignment. But generally, I think this is welcome, and thank you to the Sardic PF for this consultative process. We hope to engage even more with this model law as we do our action plans to ensure that we engage at the national levels and monitor domestication first, but implementation as well in some of the provisions to ensure that we have sound and robust PFM systems that curb corruption, that curb illicit financial flows, excessive borrowing or irresponsible borrowing by our governments. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Janet, from the Zimbabwe Coalition on Debt and Development, for this very excellent submissions. And, your comments are welcome. Your questions are also welcome. We'll put that on the parking lot as we continue so that we give an opportunity to the legal drafter to respond after we have taken a few more from the floor. I think a very important point you've raised, one on enabling domestication, building the capacity of oversight so that parliamentarians are able to step up to their role. Then there is the issue of how this model law comes to influence ongoing processes and the possibility of reform clauses that can enable, the smooth entry of these provisions into, other ongoing work at national level. Thank you very much, Janet. And, before I give up the floor to Dr. Greenberg, I will take a few more comments. Please allow me to invite Eswatini, if we have a civil society members from Eswatini, We invite you to take the floor. Eswatini, Lesotho, Madagascar. Members, any member from Madagascar who would like to take the floor? Madagascar, Malawi. Members from Malawi. Welcome.
Oui, vous m'entendez? Merci. D'abord, je voudrais parce que, comme je l'ai dit sur le message tout à l'heure, j'étais sur la route, je suis sur la route pour le retour sur Tana. J'ai pu suivre un peu la session, mais j'ai quand même demandé est-ce que si c'était possible de nous envoyer l'enregistrement après. Par rapport à ce que j'ai entendu, je pense que ça serait nécessaire de continuer, on va dire, sur une deuxième session plus approfondie sur cette thématique-là et essayer peut-être de faire une session multi-acteurs, c'est-à-dire pas seulement la société civile, mais aussi les politiques et tous les autres acteurs possibles pour qu'on puisse maintenant avancer sur des discussions. Voilà, merci.
Thank you very much. Ni Aina Rahagalala, Madagascar, thank you very much for your observations. Please feel free to continue, contributing even on the chat box. And we continue to welcome your observations and thank you for the kind words. Malawi. Civil society from Malawi. Mauritius.
Yes, I'm the representative of Transparency Mauritius. My name is Lovania Pertap. Thank you, Mrs. Facilitator, and thank you, Mr. Greenberg, for this very insightful expose. What is happening in Mauritius is that we have laws, but we have a big problem with the implementation of laws. It appears that we are being unable to fight corruption properly. Regarding the IFFs, we all know that a large part of it goes through the offshore sector in Mauritius. And my question would be, do you think it is necessary to have legislation regarding a register of ultimate beneficial owners so that politicians, criminals, big business, they can no longer hide behind shell companies and other schemes to benefit from the offshore sector, and nothing happens to them. In practice, nothing is happening to them in my country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lovenia, from Mauritius, for this very strong, submission and the question of the jurisdiction that you find yourselves working very hard in transparency. And given that transparency, what can we do to, unravel the mystery that enables hiding, that enables secrecy, and therefore enables IFFs to continue thriving. Thank you very much, Lovenia. I think I can take one more, then give a pause to allow Dr. Greenberg to respond to some of the issues that are coming on the table. Mozambique, one more from Mozambique, if there is a Mozambique member, before we hand over to Dr. Greenberg to respond. Anyone from Mozambique? Okay, Fambai, please take the floor.
Thank you, Madam, distinguished participants, everyone. This is an important process, a strengthening one for all of us. Just two questions to our distinguished drafter around the section on the SDG budget. In principle, it does make sense, but what is the incentive for governments to align their development processes to the SDGs? And indeed, is there potential for us to consider other African, or especially in Sardic, homegrown development standards and indicators, at least to prioritize those under Section 60, in addition to the SDG framework? My second question to our distinguished drafter is on the possibility of a peer review mechanism built in so that different governments in Southern Africa can also hold themselves accountable to each other for their performance around key PFM objectives.
Thank you very much, Fambai. Thank you very much, Fambai, for this very precise questions. I believe Dr. Greenberg has already taken note. The incentives behind SDG financing, considering homegrown indicators based on other frameworks that are available on the African continent or even at the subcontinental level, peer review mechanisms for mutual accountability. Allow me, Dr. Greenberg, to take one more from Lasarda. Lasarda, please take the floor.
Yes, good morning. I don't know if you can hear me properly.
Yes, you're clear.
Yes, yes, my name is Lasarda from Mozambique. I am working on the Academy of Study of Development. Just to appreciate and welcome this process, we acknowledge the role of model law will play in enhancing and transparency in public finance management. However, I didn't hear much on the role of tax and transparency in the tax revenue generation, allocation, and use. I think that the focusing on those issues would ensure the countries to raise more revenues and the sustainable it can be able to also clear their debit burdens. So I should like to hear, for instance, this angle or from the speaker on that side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lasarda. I think this is a very good question on the piece of revenue generation, because we are largely conversing around management. So there is before we get to manage, how do we increase opportunities to expand the envelope, and also the important piece of managing the debt burden. Thank you very much, Lasarda. At this point, I take a pause and invite Dr. Greenberg to take the floor on these issues that have been raised. Over to you, Dr. Greenberg.
On the points made by the distinguished delegate from Zimbabwe, I respectfully agree with everything that she said. In relation to implementation strategy, which fundamentally revolves around the domestication process and the post-domestication process, Madame Secretary General may wish to address this in her closing remarks to today's consultative forum, but I fundamentally accept that laying out the provisions in the model law is not the end of the story, it's the beginning of the story. We can do it in a way that invites orderly and effective implementation, but the domestication process is ultimately within the hands of each SADC state. In relation to her observations about parliamentary committees and in particular capacity building for parliamentarians, I'm not immediately clear what legislative provision on the face of the model law could be made to support the capacity building process, which is clearly a very important one. But if she has any suggestions as to what could properly be said within the envelope of this law, or perhaps in guidance emanating out of this law, and she were able and willing to note those in a brief written submission, I would be enormously grateful, and I and Madame Facilitator, the rest of the technical working group, will certainly make it a priority to consider her pertinent observations. In relation to the submissions of the distinguished delegate from Madagascar, he will be delighted to know that as part of the consultative process, we are already taking many steps to involve politicians in the way that he suggests, and the Secretariat will be able to give him more details of the politician engagement process in which we have been involved. In relation to the comments of the distinguished delegate from Mauritius, I am personally quite attracted to the notion of beneficial registers. Most of the jurisdictions in which I work have an increasing set of obligations for disclosure of beneficial ownership. But I say to her with a certain amount of trepidation that I fear that provision belongs in the corporate code of each jurisdiction. It is not inherently a public financial management issue. And therefore, while I completely agree with her that it is an essential prerequisite for the proper operation of the public financial management system, it is a requisite for inclusion in the corporate registration provisions of each jurisdiction. In relation to the comments made by the first distinguished delegate from Mozambique, I think the straight and honest answer to his question in relation to incentivization for alignment with the sustainable development process, I think the honest answer is no. Again, what the Public Financial Management Bill model law can do is ensure the transparency and accountability in the process of the budget to enable such incentivization as has been achieved to be monitored, tracked, and enforced. But the incentivization itself has to come at a political local level, and I do not think that anything in the model law could provide that incentivization itself. But if he feels that is wrong, I will again be enormously grateful for any written submission suggestions that he cares to make, and I and the technical working group will give them the fullest consideration. The same goes on his point about peer review. I'm a little bit nervous about that, I have to say. I'm a little bit nervous about the constitutional autonomy implications of a peer review system for financial management. In my experience, the principles underpinning that are achieved through the international convention mechanism, and he will have heard that we require an international commitment statement to be included in the budget statements in that part of the model law. My instinct is that that is as far as one would want to go, but that is very much my instinct from outside. And again, if he has any detailed submissions that he would care to make on how the peer review process might work, I would be very interested indeed to see them and to discuss them with the technical working group, but I wish to be honest and open with distinguished delegates this morning, and I therefore feel it only right to accept that it's incumbent on me to express a certain nervousness in relation to that suggestion. In relation to the comments of the second distinguished delegate from Mozambique, I echo your response, Madam Facilitator, that revenue generation is, of course, a fundamental prerequisite, and it is, of course, therefore a fundamental priority. Again, it is not something on which the model law itself will necessarily have a lot to say, but one of the reasons for articulating at the beginning of the model law in the way that I showed distinguished delegates the correlation between fiscal policy and expenditure policy is to make that clear that you can't spend what you haven't acquired. So I very much agree with the principles underpinning his observation, and I think they speak to the fundamental expressed principles of the model law, but not to any of the specific provisions later on in later parts of that law.
Thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg, for participants. You're welcome, on every point that has been raised to make written suggestions.
Madam Claire, it looks like Caroline is temporarily frozen.
Forgive me, distinguished participants. I think we had an outage. We had a slight outage on the internet. Forgive me as I appear frozen in one. I hope you can hear me. I was just thanking Dr. Greenberg for the comments and the responses. Please feel free to share your written submissions to the Secretariat so that we can have your input considered by Dr. Greenberg and the technical committee. At this juncture, we wish to recognize the next set of countries. I can see Rangarira Ichkova has the hand up. Please take the floor, Rangarira. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Firstly, I would like to appreciate the efforts being made by Sardic Parliamentary Forum to come up with a model law that will see improvements in the management of public funds. So having read the model law, I have seen that there's been focus on debt. And when we talk of public finance management, you also need to consider how resources are going to be mobilized. In the beginning of this workshop, we talked about illicit financial flows and domestic resource mobilization. But however, in the model law, I haven't seen sections which stress on domestic resource mobilization. I would like to know from the drafter, to what extent is this model law going to include or assimilate some of the recommendations aimed at improving domestic resource mobilization? For example, we have the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows. It details specific recommendations that African countries should implement to improve domestic resource mobilization. And last year, we have the UN FACT panel report, which also complements the high-level panel report on illicit financial flows in terms of improving financial transparency, accountability, and integrity. To what extent is this model law going to include the aspirations of these reports to ensure improved domestic resource mobilization? And then secondly, on tax transparency, to what extent is this model law going to improve tax transparency, specifically on expenditure reporting? We have seen that most of our countries are giving tax incentives to investors as a way to attract investment. But as citizens, we need to know how much we are losing through tax expenditure. So as a suggestion, the functions of the ministers of finance should also include the production of tax expenditure reports, and these reports should be publicly available and should also be debated in Parliament, just like the way we see our parliamentarians, debating on our budgets. I think for now, those are my submissions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this excellent points on domestic mobilization, so domestic resource mobilization and tax incentive, the tax incentives and rather the implications that has, how much are we losing? Do we have transparency? Even though these are methods that are being used to increase or entice investment into our countries. I think that's a very good point. So you can just hold on a little bit on that, and let us have Namibia. Let us have Team Namibia take the floor. Team Namibia, for your submissions.
Thank you, Madam Facilitator. We in Namibia got only to know about this meeting about 2 days ago. So we are very thinly represented, but we shared this as the Civil Society Information Center to those that have been known to have a keen interest and also done research on this topic. Not on the model law. Like I said, we were not aware that something like that is in the making. But when I saw the calendar of consultations, I was wondering whether the analysts, for instance, audit firms, I see that the auditors are mostly the public auditors, the government, the auditor general, and so on, but the business sector as such, because they are involved in these transgressions. Or they would also be able to make contributions how to improve the law, the model law, the draft model law. And we have a lot of analysts. So these individuals and organizations I would have liked to see also participate. Like I said, I have contacted them and they have indicated keen interest, but they were unhappy for the late notification. I must say it is also difficult in Namibia. We don't currently have a civil society umbrella body. So the Civil Society Information Center, or in short Civic Plus 264, was established as a means to mitigate the absence of an umbrella body to at least get civil society involved and know what's happening in the country and in Sdgs and on the continent and in the world, where we can play a role, or what role we should play. I was also thinking the concept note was very informative, but I was wondering whether it would be possible to share, because there's just mentions to say so many Sdgs countries don't do this or so little countries do that. Is it possible to maybe get the information regarding which countries fall short? And if that is too uncomfortable, then maybe just give us the Namibian research results that we know where we fall short, so that we as civil society can take this up. Then there was, Namibia has just recently decided to establish a sovereign wealth fund. And I was thinking, should that also be covered by this draft model law? Because in our latest budget, there has been money allocated to go into the sovereign wealth fund. The other thing is, one of the colleagues mentioned the African peer review mechanism. I was also wondering, could the local country-specific national governing councils of the APRM not also be included in consultations, because what the model law is trying to improve is also partly covered by the African peer review mechanism. And we in Namibia, for instance, did, through the pressure that we as civil society put on the president, because the president is appointing the National Governance Council, we made sure that there are also civil society representatives there. So it's a pity that we were not able also, I sent the invitation to 2 of them, but we left out 1. And then the other issue in Namibia is that recently there's a lot of hype around oil discovery and also the green hydrogen. So we will watch this very closely, but it would be nice if this draft model law would help in that area. We have an organization, a research organization in Namibia, the Institute for Public Policy Research. They have just recently launched a project, a program called Integrity Namibia, where we will follow the route and path of money that went missing or was misappropriated. I think also the media have not been included in this consultation series as far as I can see from the calendar. So maybe that should also be considered.
Did we lose Carola? Carola, can you hear us? Carola? I think we lost Carola. Sometimes, sometimes the connection does go down. Maybe we could give Bradley an opportunity as we wait for Carola to come back to the floor. We will give her an opportunity to finish her remarks. Bradley, could you take the floor, please? Bradley, unmute, please.
Unmute. We've been doing these Zoom things for so long and I'm still not unmuting myself. I'm actually Carola's colleague at the Civil Society Information Center in Namibia. But just on this as well, in addition to what Carola was saying, I'm in no means an expert on this, but if you look towards the end of last year, one of the research civil society organizations or think tanks that works on this released a paper on public fiscal management, and they've actually outlined a whole lot of issues and recommendations as well. What I've done is I've put inside the document or the paper inside the chat space. So if you're looking for some accurate information on Namibia and public fiscal management, I would highly recommend that the paper is consulted as well. I think that's it. Thank you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you very much, Bradley. Thank you, Team Namibia. Once we have Carola back on board, we will give an opportunity. I think she had made very incisive observations and even recommendations on expanding the portfolio of consultation to cover probably another round of civil society, include the private sector, have a deeper dive with the media, and issues of even maximizing on the national governance systems that have been created by the Africa peer review mechanisms. Of course, additional risks or issues that are in the horizon, the green hydrogen, the oil, the opportunities that the Institute for Public Policy Research presents, and so forth. And even the challenge of not having the umbrella organization. But once again, we recognize and really appreciate the role that Civicus is playing to bridge that communication gap and ensure that there's conversations going on. At this juncture, allow me to call in Seychelles, civil society members from the Seychelles. The floor is yours. If you're in the house, kindly take the floor. Kindly raise your hand and take the floor so that we're able to see you. Seychelles, South Africa, Tanzania, representatives from Tanzania. I think I've seen something going in the chat box. There's a question from Tanzania. Rogers asks, is it possible to share the document? This is the draft bill so that we can have time, the draft model law, so that we can have time to go through it properly and even bring the views and make views, present observations in writing. I think Secretariat has heard you, and at the point of closing, we will give an opportunity to the Secretariat head, the Secretary General, to respond to some of the issues that are specifically speaking into, scheduling or, issues that are probably policy issues, and any further recommendations of sharing the technical document will come from Secretariat. So Tanzania, the floor is yours. The floor is yours. If you'd like to make some contributions in plenary, please take the floor. Observations from Tanzania. Rogers, would you like to take the floor? Rogers, can you hear us?
Hello.
Yes,
yes, Madam Moderator. My name is Rogers, as you said, from Tanzania. Currently, I have no observation. I think I'm waiting to hear from the General Secretary if will allow us to have time and go through the document and bring the recommendation through even in writing and so.
Thank you. Thank you, Rogers. Thank you very much, Rogers. I believe your point has been taken by Secretariat team. We would like to invite Zambia to the floor. I can see we have representatives from the Zambia Social Forum. Zambia Social Forum.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Yeah, for us as Zambia, what we are calling upon is the practicability in terms of realization of the proposals that are pertaining to the public financial management. Yeah, we understand that countries have got their sovereignty in terms of how they do manage in terms of public revenue, as well as managing the debts and so forth. But what we have seen from the different reports and also other practices from among member countries within the Sardic region is about issues to do with the realization of the documentation and recommendation that always comes through such forums like this one. I think it will be very prudent and for everyone involved, especially the public, if at least most of the things, the recommendations and actions can put into actions. because much as we always say that if things that have been elaborated on and recommended, if nothing has come to realization, then which means even the social struggles and advocacy around good governance cannot properly have upheld. So I think for us, we are calling upon all the policymakers and other key factors, partners as actors involved to ensure that the things that are coming as recommendation are fully realized in the interest of public accountability. Because if public accountability is lacking, then which means the triple efforts in terms of sustainability in different social sectors, such as health, social, management, and other pertinent social deliveries cannot be properly enhanced. So we are calling upon all the Sardic governments to ensure that they have one flat, horizontal kind of realization. If Zambia, as pertaining to the recommendation that is coming from this platform, for example, Malawi adopts the same, Zimbabwe adopts the same, Mauritius adopts the same. But of course, it cannot be exactly because of the different contexts in which countries are operating. But over and above, there must be a full realization of how the public financial management can be properly arranged. And one of the things that is also impeding the development is, of course, lack of social accountability, governance, and also the capacities of enforcement of the law and law around governance of the public. I think those are the things that we can contribute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Team Zambia, Gershom. Those are very important observations that you are bringing to the floor. The risk of that we face with sovereignty, and I think Dr. Greenberg very, very diplomatically raised, the anxieties that can come based on this fact, the fact that we have different constitutions. And of essence, I think you've said it very well. How can we frame some messaging around the benefits or what we stand to gain in terms of health and social deliverables if the public financial management scheme or framework were to be adapted, so that this can be a common rallying call that rises above the possible differences that could emerge from contextualization. There are things I think that we really share across the borders when it comes to health and social, the desired health and social outcomes. And of course, the capacity to ensure enforcement, a very, very important point that has also come from other consultations with law enforcement agencies in Sardic, and how can they get some teeth? Of course, we are faced with the same all challenges that are faced in an international law frame, that the standard is set, but then the enforceability is really dependent on the domestic frame or what is available at the municipal level. So with that, I think we have Zimbabwe. Of course, we had Zimbabwe input much earlier, but I can see Tafadzwa Chikumbu, the floor is yours. Please take the floor. Thank you for raising your hand. Tafadzwa, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, moderator, and thank you, Danielle. I also recognize Secretary General. Thank you very much for your wise words and also starting this process. So I'm coming from Transparency International Zimbabwe. And of course, I want to echo the same sentiments made by my colleague from Mauritius with respect to issues of beneficial ownership disclosure, not just for purposes of following up on funds that are stashed either in tax havens or secret jurisdictions, but I'm referring to beneficial ownership disclosure with regard to individuals and institutions that benefit from public procurement. So this specific section should probably fit quite well under the section where you have talked about public procurement. So where we have beneficial ownership disclosure around issues of public procurement. I'm also impressed by the emphasis on procurement during emergencies, which I'm sure can be further developed to guide the region in terms of how the government can actually ensure transparency, accountability, and ensuring that procurement procedures are not flouted, especially during emergencies. This is actually coming at the backdrop of COVID-19 and some of the disasters that we have gone through in the region, including the cyclone Idai for Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and other countries in the region. This comes in very handy. I also want to suggest that within the model law, we have a section that speaks around recognizing the role of civil society organizations or non-state actors in public finance management, especially when we look at some countries like Zimbabwe, for instance, where there's currently a discussion around the PVO bill, which limits the role of civil society organizations in governance processes. But yet it is becoming a global phenomenon for civil society actors to critically participate in governance processes, including public finance management. My other issue is around, yes, I've seen sections around offenses, but then I would also be glad to see standard offenses or penalties. I mean, penalties for those offenses, and ensuring that they're actually adhered to. So it's about implementation as well, which came out quite frequently from the other institutions. And of course, there was also a suggestion around the setting up of thresholds. Yes, for debt, we already have a 60% debt to GDP ratio, but some countries have imposed 70% within the same region, contrary to the Sardic protocol on public finance, Sardic protocol on budget and finance, I think. So how do we ensure that what has been agreed in our regional frameworks is actually adhered to, rather than just having them in black and white and not being implemented? So the same goes to setting up thresholds. We already have thresholds for revenue allocation to health, education, and agriculture based on the Maputo Declaration, Abuja, and others. Is it also important under the budget to have a section that also emphasizes on the critical thresholds with regards to revenue allocation to these critical sectors? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tafadzwa. These are, very, very strong points, actually. The issue of procurement, zooming in on the beneficial ownership disclosure under the procurement clause. Emergencies. I think this was a global issue of concern, especially with the history of COVID, the very recent history. We don't call it history because we are living through it. What COVID-19 has taught us, but other humanitarian situations as well are at risk. I mean, this issue still presents a major challenge. The role of non-state actors, the consequences. Are this, could this be articulated more and so forth? I think Dr. Greenberg has really taken the points. I can see, Tafadzwa, you fired up the floor, and I can see Lasarda and Lucid wishing to come back to the floor, we will give the opportunity to Lasarda and Lucid. First, Lasarda, please take the floor, then Lucid, and then hand over to the legal drafter to make responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I did my first intervention. This second one will be like a short brief because I'm a bit wondering because I said that we don't have a Portuguese translation. So my concern now is the Sdgs PF is going to organize another meeting in Portuguese for us coming from this country, which really English is not our main language to discuss the issue, because I know that many inputs can be not included because of the language barrier, and I know the Sdgs Portuguese is one of the Sdgs languages. So that's my concern as a Mozambican, and I will appreciate if the Sdgs PF can take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lasarda. Very well noted. Sincere apologies for that challenge. The Secretariat team, I believe, has taken note of that and will respond favorably, including, making sure that, if the opportunity provides for an ongoing, another conversation, then that will be communicated to you. Lucid was our last, but I can see Chipiwa. I would like to say something. So can we have Lucid and then, okay, guys, I can see the floor is going on fire. Can we just have a minute for Lucid, a minute for Chipiwa, a minute for Julie, because it's getting very active, so that, Dr. Greenberg is, able to respond to all your remarks at a go. Lucid, over to you.
Thank you very much, the facilitator, for the chance. You see, I understand that this instrument that we are discussing today is a law of order and means of avoidance to public financial management anarchy and strife in the Southern African region. So it is interesting to note that this law is coming at a time Africa is implementing the African Continental Free Trade Area, at a time where we are talking of the AU Agenda 2063, at a time where we are also talking of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, at a time again where African Union is implementing the digital transformation strategy. So the law we are discussing today will surely be a success in a continent that embraces the digital era we are in today. It will be a success in a continent where there's a free movement of goods, service, labor, and persons. It will be a success in a continent with one single currency, like what the African Continental Free Trade Area is trying to do. In a continent, again, that break the digital divide. Again, in a continent that ensure Africa's ownership of modern tools of digital management. So I am of the view that it's obviously going to be a challenge for the modern law to respond to constitutional modern realities, like what the presenter said, in each member countries, because of the difference in levels of development and democracies in Southern Africa. And again, the great majority of rules of international law are generally observed by all nations without actual compulsion, for it is generally in the interest concerned to honor their obligation under law. It's all about national interest. So my policy advice is that there's need for formal, strong institutions responsible for law enforcement, because without them, the law won't be a success. So there's need for a set of rules that seeks to control states and citizens in their actions if this modern law is to achieve its goals. So all international relations involved in this, or all international players involved in this law, are required to cooperate fully to make this law more effective, as it is based on common self-interest. So that's why it is so interesting to see that civil societies are involved. The media also need to be involved. The lawyers, they need to be involved. And amongst other institutions within, even the academics need to be involved. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucid, for reminding us the setting, the context within which this law finds itself, and the time in history that this law finds itself in Africa. In between all that is going on, but most importantly, how do we support the honoring of obligations in the face of national interests? Very important political question that we have taken note of. Of course, the issue of enforcement once again coming in. Let us hear from Chipiwa. Chipiwa, please take the floor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Facilitator. The law, the model law on the public finance management, this policy is of great importance as key populations are also involved, mainly and being kept as also a gainful employer. So we are saying this modern law on public finances it will be successful in the region where the leaders accepted democracy. Without democracy, and the public should be
Chipiwa, did we lose you? Madam Chipiwa, can you hear us? Hello, Madam Chipiwa. I think we lost Chipiwa.
Cooperating also included during the adoption rather than hello?
Yes, we lost you for a moment. Please proceed. Please proceed. Madam Chipiwa. I think we've lost Chipiwa. We've lost Chipiwa. We will follow on her remarks. Julie, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Facilitator. I'm with the Partnership for Social Accountability Alliance, which is a consortium of organizations, including ActionAid International, the Eastern and Southern Africa Small Scale Farmers Forum, SAFAIDS, as well as the Public Service Accountability Monitor, PSAM. And we're running a project which looks at strengthening social accountability in health and agriculture in Southern Africa. And I think we really applaud the efforts that Sardic PF and Dr. Greenberg have put into developing this model law and all the great work that's gone into it so far. So my question is around the disconnect between international commitments and budgeting. I know this is mentioned, I believe, on page 13 and page 20 of the model law document, just in the PDF page numbers. And I think this is particularly in relation to various sectors, but specifically perhaps for our interests around the Malabo Declaration, which is around the need for a 10% allocation towards agriculture, as well as the Abuja Declaration, which commits member states to 15% allocation towards health. And I think my question is around how does the model law specifically address this? Are there any specific provisions which we can lean on around this?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you very much, Julie, for this excellent question. Of course, what can we do about the disconnect? And once again, the issue of thresholds, the extent to which I think there was a speaker earlier, I think it was Tafadzwa, who also made reference to thresholds. And what can we do to ensure that commitments that have been taken, Malabo, Abuja, and others, are really respected insofar as this opportunity provides. I think with that, Lucid, I think you had made contributions, so maybe you could lower your hand if it's not an additional comment. I really would like to take this opportunity to invite Dr. Greenberg to take the floor and respond to the best possible extent. I mean, these have been very great comments, excellent observations. Some have answers, some may be work in progress. Over to you, Dr. Greenberg, to address some of these concerns.
In relation to the comments made by Rangarire Chikova, I, of course, accept the importance of domestic resource mobilization strategy. The emphasis in the model law on transparency is relevant to that strategy, but it could well be that we can say something about it in the model law in a more specific way, and his written submissions with suggestions on precisely how the public financial management principles could be related to regulation of the domestic resource mobilization strategy will be very much, very gratefully received and perused with the greatest of interest. The distinguished delegate from Namibia was making a number of comments about potential consultation and involvement in relation to the development of the model law, and those comments are not a matter for me. Madame Secretary General will doubtless address them in her closing remarks. Zambia, the distinguished delegate from Zambia spoke to the importance of implementation action, and I respectfully concur with everything that was said. I have already outlined that the model law aims to outline the enforcement action that requires to be taken in order to make it effective, but ultimately the enforcement strategy is a matter for effective domestication within the political and legal context of each jurisdiction. The comments that were made about sovereignty, I respectfully concur with. In relation to the comments of the distinguished delegate from Zimbabwe, I've already spoken to the point about beneficial ownership disclosure. I'm a bit nervous, frankly, about having a special rule for beneficial ownership disclosure in relation to public procurement. I'm not against, obviously, considering it, and I'm in the hands of the Parliamentary Forum, the technical working group in the matter of the policy. But I'm very nervous about it because the reality is that the opportunities for illicit financial flow through beneficial ownership secrecy goes so far beyond public procurement that to say something about it there would be unlikely, in my respectful submission, to have a significant impact. But to deal with it in a broader way within each jurisdiction's wider corporate register regulatory laws would have a much more profound impact. So it's certainly something that, of course, I will look at with great interest when I see what they propose. But I do have an initial nervousness about it. I was intrigued by the suggestion of a greater role for civil society organizations on the face of the bill. Obviously, we have, as I already mentioned, the public participation principles in the model law that would be available to civil society organizations. But if the distinguished delegate has a suggestion of an express statutory role for civil society organizations in the public financial management model law, I will look at that with enormous interest. he raised a question about penalties. I repeat what I said before, they require to be contextualized within a coherent criminal and penal structure in each jurisdiction. He asked about the implementation of the debt thresholds, and again, so far we are building it into the budget oversight mechanism. If he has any other suggestions, those will be gratefully received. The distinguished delegate speaking for the Action Aid coalition of interest groups raised the question of the budget disconnect in relation to international commitments. It is difficult for me to say anything terribly constructive in relation to that. We have, as she noted, we have put on the face of the model law an express requirement for a reporting structure in relation to international commitments to be incorporated in the budget documents. And I would like to think that that might go some way towards achieving the desired goal. But I hear that she feels there is more that we could do. And again, if she has any suggestions as to how that could be turned into specific provisions that are capable of being enforced in the budget context, then we will definitely look at that very seriously and be very grateful for her suggestions.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Greenberg. I think some of these suggestions and some of the recommendations, once again, are very much welcome by the Secretariat. And you know, as we go along, of course, based on the principles that Dr. Greenberg very, you know, graciously and patiently explained at the very beginning, we will, you know, the comments will be taken in light of those principles against which this model law is being constructed, so that, you know, while it's complex, or while we are dealing with complex technicalities, we can still achieve the simplicity and clarity that is required for the users against, you know, across the whole realm. So just a quick reminder of, you know, the extent to which comments, you know, will be absorbed into the main instrument, but also a moment of encouragement that as we go along, I'm sure the Secretariat will also provide for conversations around the means of implementation, where some of these realities can start to take a life or have a reality, I mean, become real and closer to implementation as much as we intend them to be. At this point, please allow me to invite the Director of Programs from Sardic Parliamentary Forum, Your Excellency Kurasha. Kurasha, please take the floor so that you can address specific issues that have been fronted to the Secretariat on behalf of the Secretary General. Over to you, Kurasha.
Thank you very much, Carol, for the opportunity. And it has been very interesting, quite interactive session with civil society. My interventions are limited to a few issues that were raised that are specific to the Sardic Parliamentary Forum. The first one is an administrative one relating to the availability of Portuguese simultaneous interpretation. The Sardic PF meetings are always held in the three official languages, French, English, and Portuguese. The slight challenge we had was at the time of the confirmations, it wasn't too clear that there was going to be Portuguese-speaking participants, and that's what then affected the availability of Portuguese, purely administrative, because there is contracting that needs to take place. So we need to usually have known in advance. Apologies about that. We will make sure that in future, as usual, we have all the 3 official languages. The second issue and more substantive relates to the question raised about the need to build the capacity of parliamentarians in terms of oversight. This is an important matter in the context that when you look at the Sadc PF strategic plan, strategic objective 3 is very clear about the need to capacitate parliaments and parliamentarians in terms of skills, in terms of competencies, in terms of knowledge. And if you recall, during the presentation, during welcome remarks, the Secretary General was very pointed on in terms of making a call to civil society to come and partner with Sadc PF in terms of the various opportunities that are there, whether they are technical working groups or other such platforms. And SG said, to those that are not yet on board, they are invited to come on board. And this is part of our strategy in terms of strengthening the capacity of parliamentarians and the organs of national parliaments, including committees, because we do recognize, again, as the SG articulated in a speech, the capacities that reside and competencies that reside within civil society, and that we do not need to duplicate, but through collaboration, we then bring on board civil society to make sure that they partner with parliament. So while parliamentarians as individuals may lack the necessary skills and knowledge sometimes, what is important to recognize is the mandate they carry, which is constitutional and legal, and therefore through partnership, we can be able to make sure that we capacitate them and they are able to hold the executive accountable within the broad framework of promoting the capacity of parliament to perform their mandate, including oversight. Sadc Parliamentary Forum has developed the benchmarks for democratic legislatures in Southern Africa. It's a tool that is available to civil society, where national parliaments, through that document, they've done 2 things. The first one is to commit to the fact that there are minimum constitutional, legal, administrative, and other arrangements that they need in place to be effective. But in so doing, also unpacking the different areas where opportunities are for civil society to be able to work with parliaments. And this tool is critical even in assisting parliaments in terms of implementing parliamentary reforms. And I think this is an opportunity that civil society can ride on to be able to assist parliaments to become more effective. And again, lastly, Carol, the development of model laws themselves is actually a major intervention by Sadc Parliamentary Forum to build the capacity of not just parliamentarians and parliaments, but also policymakers and other actors across the spectrum to be able to bring to bear regional and international frameworks, commitments, aspirations into national, domestic, legal and policy frameworks. And therefore, the model laws must be viewed as part of the effort by the Sadc Parliamentary Forum to build the capacity of national parliaments, but also other stakeholders, including civil society. And therefore, they do create an opportunity for interface and collaboration of parliaments with civil society. So we do invite, I wish to re-echo the sentiments of the Secretary General to invite civil society to come on board so that we tackle the question of the lack of capacity that might be obtaining in our national parliaments and their different structures. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurasha, for making this very excellent interventions to respond to some of the concerns that have come from the floor. It's very well said. We can make parliamentarians and parliaments ultimately more effective through these types of collaboration around the model laws that bring both the Parliamentary Forum and the civil society together. We really appreciate your input towards that end. And at this point, distinguished members, I wish to really thank you for being very active on the floor. We would like to bring the plenary session to a close. Of course, the chat box continues for the next few minutes, but the email boxes are open for you to continue contributing. And we'd like to take this opportunity to welcome the Secretary General, Madam Boimo Segoma, to make the closing remarks. Over to you, Madam SG.
Thank you very much. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. And let me also extend my appreciation, as always. I'm never disappointed by, the leadership provided by our Dr. Greenberg, who is assisting us in developing this particular model law. I'd also like to thank you, civil society colleagues, for coming in your numbers and ensuring that we are not left behind in terms of hearing from you, the people who represent the citizens of Sardic and beyond. Your comments, your enthusiasm, and your guidance has been taken on board, and we will endeavor to ensure that we follow you where you are and ensure that we bring you on board to the Sardic region for you to assist us in this regard. Madam Moderator, thank you very much for your able leadership as usual and representing the technical working group very well. I believe everybody else on this platform agrees with me. You've done a great job of bringing all the comments home and assisting us to engage effectively. Let me, before I close, just address one particular issue, which all the women in the region will never forgive me for if I do not do that. There was a question around feminization of IFF. I would like to agree with the participant who raised this issue on the chat and assure her or her organization, and everybody else on this platform, that the forum agrees that we need more women and girls to speak on issues of illicit financial flows. This is another clarion call to say, let us join hands, because this is what the forum wants to build in the future, and it is in line with the forum's strategic plan. The challenge before us, colleagues, which I would like to invite you to come and assist us, is that the institution of Parliament, and let me just say our members of Parliament, are faced with a challenge. And the challenge is that they need to apply the knowledge and gender analytical skills in their day-to-day work of that or as executing their mandate. I'm very much aware that you have partnered with Parliament, some of you, and have been working with them to deal with the issue of how gender responsive budgets should be integrated. Let us work together with the committees of parliaments. Let us work with our members of parliament in their constituencies. Let us infiltrate the political parties, some of which most of us are members, and ensure that we overemphasize the issue of political prudence, which requires that members of parliament should be gender sensitive, because the majority of voters are women, and women yield a huge potential and power in ensuring that some of these issues are addressed as they're the main voters. We all know that the issue of gender responsive budgeting is possible. And I invite you, colleagues, to assist us, whether by scrutinizing line items or looking at how performance, budgeting or zero budgeting can be looked at, because it does provide opportunities through agenda-focused performance indicators for us to report on. I spoke about media at the beginning. Please help us analyze. Some of you are in the business of analysis, and you can assist us in ensuring that this model law, as it's domesticated, also touches on how we can integrate some of these matrices and how we can monitor gender disaggregated indicators, how we can analyze allocations against planned expenditure and come up with possible assessments of how the model law can engender some of these indicators. Colleagues, let me appeal to you as I end that the spirit that united some of our independent states in our region to form part of a group that was known as the Frontline States, and the determination to ensure that this region is constituted of free and independent member states, despite the huge military and economic damage that was incurred as a result of war, should drive us to confront the twin enemies of corruption and underdevelopment. And only the PFM framework is an avenue that can begin to assist us in our resolve and ensure that the citizens in our countries are properly empowered and educated with information and skills to fully participate in this public financial management framework towards domestication. We as a Sardic Parliamentary Forum rely on you to come up with activities as part of the post-adoption strategies that can reinforce the role of yourselves as CSOs, as agents of change in the interest of the citizenry. So that's another clarion call to guide the Sardic Parliamentary Forum in this regard. We rely on you, among other things, because if we were to draw from the objectives contained in the Sardic Treaty, it is clear one of the objectives is imperative that we must achieve development and economic growth. We must alleviate poverty and enhance standard and quality of life of the people of Southern Africa and support the socially disadvantaged through regional integration. With your permission, I will not go back to what our brother from UNECA underscored in this morning's keynote address, but I'd like to reiterate that at this point, it is critical that we must be catalysts, we must be comrades in arms, we must ensure that parliamentarians or the institution of parliament does not operate for 5 years in vain. And I would not repeat my remarks as anything new, as Mr. Sheonene Kuracha did a great job of emphasizing the important aspects of what I highlighted in my meeting today. With these few words, I'd like to wish you a happy afternoon and thank you profusely for your engagement and your powerful comments that we will take on board and the technical working group will really look at in order for us to see how then some of your comments can form part of the post-adoption strategies in terms of how do we monitor some of the protocols and treaties and agreements that are there, and how do we engage under the pillar of participatory democracy. I thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you for running this meeting effectively.
Thank you very much, Madam SG. Kindly let's give a round of applause for this great leadership that continues to be provided by Madam Boy Mosekoma, and the bringing together of the entire region. I won't say any much more than what she has said. Everything is very well put out, and yes, we will remember to share the document so that you can continue giving your remarks as we move into the final stages of development. I thank you very much for your excellent attention, and with your permission, Madam SG, I wish to bring this meeting to a close and request for the communication and media team to terminate